Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? I'm glad everyone is awake after the party last night. Um, as Megan mentioned, my name is Brian, and I manage DocuSign at Microsoft. I first got into this role about 2 years ago. It actually joined Microsoft 2 years ago. This was actually my first role at Microsoft, and my manager, the very first day that I came into Microsoft, actually told me, Brian, I just have one mission for you. I want you to know DocuSign better than the DocuSign folks so you can better help the Microsoft teams that want to use your service. So I said, okay. And right away, I had some great CSAs that are actually here today, so they can actually answer some questions. They're waving their hands in the back. So if you have any questions regarding the CSA program, and I'll be talking about a little bit of what they do for us here at DocuSign, or at Microsoft. So at Microsoft, we've had a DocuSign relationship going on 10 years. Back in 2005, whoever caught Peggy's presentation kind of touched on this a little bit. Back in 2005, Microsoft decided to try to use an electronic signature service and kind of pilot it with a couple use cases. So the first year that we used DocuSign, we actually didn't have a lot of traffic. Actually, I think that first year, and my CSAs can correct me if I'm wrong, we had like 349 transactions, and that was it. So we weren't overly using the product. We really didn't understand the impact it could have on our organization at the time. And we really didn't have a solid strategy for deploying this to a large enterprise. So we primarily kept it within the groups that you would assume would necessarily need an electronic signature platform, like HR. You know, some HR teams started using it for offer letters, NDAs, things of that nature that needed to go out to a main company or throughout the company, but there were no integrations. It was still being used at a very low scale. Procurement, purchase orders, one-off contracts all over the place. As you can imagine, at Microsoft being such a large organization, you had accounts kind of started to be stood up all over the place. And quickly, legal started being concerned. You know, they started thinking things like, how do we know what's being used, what's being signed, what's being sent? Can we be sure that nobody's violating our privacy policies? How do we do this? How do we manage this going forward? So also, we did kind of an environmental impact study at the time to kind of validate a electronic signing platform at Microsoft. So before DocuSign, I heard some numbers before I joined that I thought were kind of interesting. So because we're Microsoft, we have to reference the Space Needle at least once during our presentation. So if you can imagine the size of the Space Needle, the height is about 600 feet. It's pretty tall. I don't know if has anyone ever been to Seattle? So you can confirm it's pretty tall. At the time, before we deployed DocuSign at Microsoft, we were consuming roughly 3 times the size of the Space Needle in paper to run our business. Contracts, procurement, letters, offer letters, everything that you can imagine under the sun. What did that translate into? We were using roughly 3,000 reams of paper, almost 1.5 million sheets of paper to run our business. And that kind of concerned a few people. We started an initiative shortly thereafter called Digitopia. Digitopia was initially, in essence, a Go Green initiative within Microsoft to basically identify culprits like our paper transactions and see how we can kind of eliminate them as much as possible, be environmentally conscious. And that's when basically they decided to centralize electronic signature within our IT organization. So we stood up, Microsoft being a software company, we already had an Integration Center of Excellence, or ICOE, and we decided to add DocuSign as one of the services that we offered within that ICOE team. We also did an ROI, or a cost impact study. At the time, Microsoft, now these numbers had to be vetted through legal, and they were okay with us presenting these numbers, but actually the cost savings were a lot higher than this. This basically translates into hard dollar savings for us. We didn't take into account like full-time employee costs that it would take to kind of have people scanning, preparing documents, sending documents. A lot of the costs in this estimate is basically around shipping costs, FedEx charges, things that we can actually count relatively easily and nobody disputes. So this year alone, I mean, I know you saw a different number at Peggy's presentation. That was based on last year's usage. Because of the great work our CSAs and my team have done this year, we've actually surpassed last year's utilization at Microsoft at the halfway mark of the year. Our fiscal year goes from July to June. So as of January, we already saved more than the entire contract that we paid with DocuSign. So it's great value to the company. How did we decide to roll this out internally at Microsoft? It's kind of really the unique story here. Sorry, these are some common use cases that I find interesting. I show it because DocuSign has a similar slide. I think they got a lot of these use cases from us. So in procurement, you can imagine a lot of the procurement, master vendor agreements, change orders, NDAs. We had a use case where we collect social security numbers. It was important that we needed that we use something very secure for that, so we use DocuSign. W4s. We do a lot in IT as well. You might think, what possible use cases could we leverage DocuSign for in IT? We actually have a very good one that we've initiated this year for SOX compliance. So for release management sign-off, we actually use DocuSign to kind of collect the signatures from the delivery team and get our GM's approval before we release anything into production. So when the SOX auditors, I mean, you'd be surprised how many failures we have for simple things like centralizing evidentiary for our release management so that people can actually go and see where the leadership approved a release before it goes into production. So it's a very big deal for us to have a reliable system that can track that for us. Legal, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? A lot of legal use cases. Marketing, so we discovered a new use case in the field recently in our research and development division. So we do a lot of studies with users on our products to make sure that it's intuitive and works as designed and people can understand how they work. And so that requires a lot of NDAs to be signed, and until recently, a lot of that traffic was traditional paper. People would go to an event, you'd have event organizers there with clipboards and paper and collecting signatures on that. We decided to use DocuSign, really unique way. We actually enabled the individual user to use their own devices to basically submit their own NDAs. They can scan a QR code, open up a browser window, start filling out the NDA, submitting it into the event organizer to be able to participate in the event. Facilities, as Peggy mentioned yesterday in her keynote, we use a lot of this for a lot of the construction that we do, right? We completely moved that to DocuSign as well. And I already kind of spoke about engineering. So in essence, right now, total since we've launched the program centrally, we've used about 340 use cases. Some have kind of gone dormant, but at any given time at Microsoft, we're using DocuSign to support between 230 and 250 use cases. And we use it in 130 countries. I know Peggy said 97. We do business with DocuSign in 97 countries. Internal Microsoft uses it in 130. So this is the original implementation kind of format that we decided to use when we first deployed our DocuSign at Microsoft. We did a study on the different electronic signature platforms. We rated a bunch of them. There were like 5 at the time. It came down to 2, EchoSign or DocuSign. We decided to go with DocuSign at the time because we felt it was easier to integrate because they built their platform on our stack. So we thought when we have to integrate, the connectors will be easy to deploy. So we built a common layer because we really weren't sure at the time, our relationship, how far we wanted to go. So we built our own integration layer, and all these line of business applications that ran our business would actually connect to our e-sign layer, and then we would connect this layer to DocuSign to run the electronic signature workflows. And it worked really great. But things started happening. DocuSign started getting better. They started releasing more functionality, more robust functionality, better tracking, better telemetry information. And we couldn't keep up with all the functionality in our integration platform, so we weren't able to expose those new features to our enterprise. So what we decided to do was remove that layer. You know, we said, you know what, DocuSign's a solid tool. It's been working great. Why don't we just have everyone directly integrate so they can take a full advantage of all the features and functions DocuSign has to offer. So we threw out the old model and we started a new one. You know, we developed relationships with our Office 365 team, helping DocuSign build connectors so that our employees, our customers can use DocuSign, their workflow through products that everyone uses on a daily basis without having to leave the experience they're in to go do a function that a lot of them might use quite regularly. We had to transition last year. We spent a lot of time transitioning all the lines of business that were utilizing e-sign to use DocuSign directly. And now, because of that, we are able to expose a lot of the new telemetry features that DocuSign has within our ecosystem. And so, just kind of to conclude, I know I'm running out of time. Our journey with DocuSign was slow to begin with. You know, thinking it's a technology company, a lot of people assume we knew what we were doing with the service at the beginning, but we didn't. We were discovering it. It was relatively new technology back then. It actually took us 10 years to get to 1 million transactions. This year, we have a goal to reach 1 million. So we're trying to do what we did in 10 years in one. And DocuSign's been a great partnership. You know, working with the CSAs, standing up my own engineering team to kind of help with all the different integrations has been critical for our success with this service. You know, I'm here if you have any questions. I know we're going to have a question and answer section at the end, but you know, approach me. Tell me your DocuSign story. I'd love to hear how everyone is using it, because I do believe in the product. You know, I could have left and done something else at Microsoft, but I've stayed this long because it's an easy system. It works, and I could see real value and ease of use within the enterprise. So thank you.
Sorry, guys. All right, hello. As Megan said, my name is Elise Bigley. I'm the Outbound Contracts Manager at Tune. We are headquartered in Seattle, Washington. For those who do not know a little bit more about who we are or what we do, we are a SaaS-based tech company with a focus on mobile measurement as it relates to user acquisition, discovery, retention, and engagement. We have a global presence with offices in London, Berlin, Seoul, Tel Aviv, and most recently, Tokyo. We've been named to the Inc. 500 list 3 times in a row, and we obviously have had to kind of scale with this momentum. We rely on systems and technologies that can keep us scaling at a fast pace while also remaining extremely efficient. We started in 2009. I joined in 2013. And at that time, there was very little process and procedure when it came to actually optimizing both the sales funnel and utilizing systems and technologies that would actually help us scale. We were a 2-person team. We had a 36-page manual contract that one of the attorneys would actually go through with every single client and redline. And it would take around 2 to 3 weeks to actually turn around a contract. for where we are at today, we've actually grown to a 5-person team. We have a 1-page contract. We have automated our process significantly, and we have a 1 to 2 day turnaround. So how did we get there? How did we do that? Well, I'm going to get to that after this slide. So what we used DocuSign for previously when I came on board, they had just actually switched from EcoSign to DocuSign. I did not have a lot of insight into the product itself and how it worked. So I basically kind of had to become my own DocuSign champion when it came to utilizing the system. We were using it for HR-focused templates, kind of mirroring what Brian said earlier with Microsoft, and then legal-focused templates as well. So to send to client contracts for our sales team, use offer letters, things like that. So where did we want to go? What did we want to try to do when it actually came to optimizing DocuSign for our organization? I wanted to enable the sales team to access old client contracts. As it stood, they didn't have any access to client agreements, so they actually didn't have transparency into their own sales cycle for when it came to upselling, renewals, things of that nature. We wanted to provide autonomy to them to actually be able to own the process from start to finish. So I think every salesperson probably wants the ability to close a contract on their own. Utilizing DocuSign has helped us do that. And we wanted to create a seamless experience for both internal Tune teams as well as our external Tune clients. So how did we want to get there? How did we kind of actually want to make this work? We needed to implement it, so we needed a company-wide adoption of DocuSign because we were growing way too quickly to remain efficient and scalable under our current process. And we actually wanted to integrate it. So we were unknowingly kind of paying for features that we hadn't yet utilized, such as DocuSign for Salesforce, as well as ensuring that our automated contract solutions utilize DocuSign so that we could optimize and be efficient from that perspective. So to kind of give you a little bit of a timeline and where we've come since I've come on board, in 2013, the most important thing here is actually this last column here, which at the bottom says that we have 31% of our contracts that have been automated. DocuSign has actually helped us achieve that goal. DocuSign, as I mentioned, is integrated into our automated contract solution, which is built out of Salesforce. So DocuSign is directly responsible for helping us close 31% of our contracts that had absolutely no human touch whatsoever from either my team, finance, or even a sales director. Obviously, we have scaled significantly. The far column is 2011 to 2013. This middle one here is 2014, and 2015 is this last one. So. And lastly, what I kind of wanted to touch on here was DocuSign directly helps us at Tune complete our DO initiative within the Tune code, which stands for Collaborate, Optimize, Do, and Evolve. I'm actually, as Megan mentioned, making it my personal mission to ensure that every single salesperson at Tune is a DocuSign champion and is able to use it on their own. It's incredibly important for scalability and efficiency within an organization because we are a little bit newer and we are having to implement these systems from the ground up. We want to ensure that people are getting the hands-on training and easy training at that they need to actually complete the sales cycle. So we are definitely DocuSign fans, and I know Megan has some questions, but I'm happy to take questions afterward as well to let you know a little bit about our Tune story with DocuSign. So thank you.
No, I think we're just going to open it up for questions, Q&A. Does anyone have any? You guys want to come on back up? Don't be shy. All right. Well, I will ask a couple questions. So it would be interesting to hear for both of you kind of how do you prioritize the next use case, and how do you really, what do you decide what's next from Microsoft and Tune, I guess?
For me, we try to determine which use cases will have the greatest ROI and business impact for our organization. I mean, it's not to say that we don't address the smaller use cases or the less impactful ones, but we do prioritize them. My CSAs are great at collecting all that data, all those metrics that help us decide which ones we realistically can focus on within the fiscal year, and then we plan accordingly to make sure we can onboard, find out what kind of solution or type of integration is needed for that use case, work with the teams, and prioritizing it within their roadmaps, because there's a lot of inter-team collaboration that needs to happen. And once we orchestrate that whole process, then that's when we start implementing.
Yeah, for Tune and kind of along that same vein, so we obviously have major business teams within our organization utilizing DocuSign, but who is not using it is people like, our accounting team or our business development team. We want to be able, I think from at least where I sit, we want to enable every single team at Tune to really do things autonomously in line with their own product and process. So from where I sit, we look to actually optimize the template versions of DocuSign, as well as really scaling the templates to help our sales folks close quicker. Megan and I were actually talking previously about this because I wanted to achieve a way to actually, how do we get our sales folks to want to use DocuSign? So many of them are still kind of stuck in this old archaic process of the PDF and the wet signature and things like that. And so we're actually going to work together to find a way to ensure that we can kind of gently push our salespeople into the river of digitization and using those templates, because it's something that really is going to help us scale completely.
And I was just going to ask Brian, so how do you handle that, within Microsoft, since it's your mission?
Well, there are teams. I mean, there's kind of two schools of thought. There's the old Microsoft school of thinking, pre-Satya Nadella, that likes their processes. They don't want to change, and so we try to educate them. We try to work with their process teams to understand their business case, understand what they're trying to do. We try to present them with as much information possible, and we have a lot. We have internal SharePoint pages. We have training sessions. We do kind of brown bags throughout the enterprise, a lot of things. But at the end of the day, they have to want to adopt, and we've set the standard that DocuSign is the electronic signing standard platform that we're going to use. And like I said, sometimes we have to shame them. You work for a technology company. Come on, adopt. That's what we do. Yes. Sure. 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 I think the question was our team at Microsoft that supports the DocuSign program. What does it comprise of? Well, for starters, we have CSAs, so they are part of our team. We use them for awareness and adoption, so they actually go throughout the business, identifying use cases. We have this year we had both tactical and a strategic approach. We went out to existing use cases to see if there was any new use cases within existing customers that could possibly also use DocuSign. We decided to standardize our communication on the service for the enterprise, so we developed a marketing strategy internally, how we wanted to get the word out to all the different business units across Microsoft. We have about 7 channels that we were able to use. And then we have a support team and an engineering team. They're not really large, actually. Our support team is a total of 3 people. They work 24/7 because a lot of our business processes are international, global, and they affect revenue and the way we recognize revenue around the world. So it's critical that anything happens, especially at quarter end, month end, that we have the support on hand to take care of that. At Microsoft, we have a shared service model, so we have a support engineering organization that traditionally will take care of a lot of these these platforms that we've set up as a service. However, because DocuSign is a third-party SaaS provider, we can't actually hand that off to them. So that's why my team also handles the support of DocuSign for Microsoft. But honestly, it's such a stable system. A lot of the questions that we get and a lot of the queries that come into support are you know, mainly account maintenance requests, very basic things that it doesn't take a lot of time for them to support. And the integration is a kind of a managed service. So as projects come on our roadmap that require integration work, we actually share an engineering group, and we basically pull resources that have done a lot of our integrations in the past. I have a main engineering lead that I work with. So while we do have an engineering team, I only keep one engineer to kind of do a lot of consulting. And then we work with teams. Some teams have engineers assigned to them, and we work with those to kind of build the solution together. In some cases, we build it for them. So it really depends on the business team. Oh, the environments. What was the exact question about the environments? Oh. So we do use the DocuSign demo environment. We have multiple staging accounts that we leverage within our development infrastructure. And as engineering progresses and is about to go production live, we actually migrate that account over to the production DocuSign environment, depending on which region of the world this product will support. And then we work with the certification folks on the DocuSign side to certify our integrations with them.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, as far as training goes internally, we have leveraged the DocuSign Academy. We were able to negotiate a couple of admin training courses for the power users at Microsoft. We identified the largest consuming DocuSign users at Microsoft and brought them in for the pilot course. But we also have a lot of training videos. We use Yammer kind of as a showcase site internally. And for those of you who don't know what Yammer is, it's kind of the Facebook of enterprise. And so we use that kind of as a best practices, share stories, share successes, and people have really started to take to that. And they help each other. We've created a community within Microsoft that can actually help each other deploy and understand what the platform can do. I mean, like I said, the platform is constantly evolving. I learned about new product lines this week. I learned about new features that I can now take and use. Getting that information out is critical, and having established communication channels that you can use and leverage. Also, brown bag sessions, invite the power users in during the lunch time and address one topic at a time, the ones you think are more pertinent to your organization. We've had success with doing that as well.
Yeah, since we are a smaller organization and you might not necessarily have the budget or the resources to be able to do a full-scale type of training or anything like that. I've actually written a lot of my own documentation. I know that sounds probably really daunting, but we have an internal hub, as most companies do, where employees can access a variety of information, and one of the pages we have is dedicated to sales operations, and I've written out documentation on how to correct something in DocuSign, how to reassign. I've even gone so far as to kind of come up with my own email templates that salespeople can send to their client to be like, hey, this is how you change something, this is how you do it. And also on that same vein, the training, I think even internally is huge. I mean, I do a lot of like one-on-one, we use Blue Jeans, for example, like screen shares, things like that to actually walk people through, because it does get very kind of exhausting and it's gonna take a little while. You know, there are a lot of kind of tips and tricks that are in there throughout the way. So I would actually recommend kind of like going through it yourself, listing out the steps and then doing some one-on-ones.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we went live with DocuSign in September, and one of the benefits that we see with using the tool is that we don't have to get IT engaged to do a lot of things for end users, right? But the use case that I see repeated across the university is just that we're taking a paper form, we're creating a template, we're using that template a number of times. From what I'm picking up at the conference, it seems like the next step to really, take DocuSign and kind of polish it up a little bit more, make it a little more professional, really involves getting engaged with developers and using the API. I just wonder if that's your experience as well, or if there's something in the middle there where, because what we're really trying to do is enable end users to take control of their own destiny, right, without letting them run rampant.
So the nice thing about the DocuSign APIs and the product itself, DocuSign, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand the platform is that the web console is actually built on top of their own APIs. So in other words, it's a subset of all the total features that DocuSign can actually provide your enterprise. And so oftentimes, I mean, we have a common core of features and functions that are interesting to us. So we primarily use those to integrate in our different platforms to run our business. But I'm big on automation, and we do have the budget to do a lot of automation. In your manual processes, not that they're wrong or don't work for smaller organizations, I think they work great. I like to make sure that a system is as foolproof as possible, just because of the sheer size of and the user base that we have to deal with. We can't take the risk of people not being trained on the manual process and possibly do something incorrectly. So we try to find automation wherever possible, and try to work with that organization to make sure that we both understand the business case, the workflow, and how much of it can we automate, and that's kind of the approach we take.
Sure. I have not touched the API. I don't even really know what it does. So from where I sit, I have not had to have, knock on wood, the, DocuSign technical team come in and actually try to reboot anything. Now, I can't speak for our sales operations manager because she also completely runs the Salesforce system within our company, and we really, really rely on DocuSign's integrations when it comes to automating our process for DocuSign with Salesforce, DocuSign for Spring CM, things like that. So I kind of go back to the trainings question earlier, where it comes down for me is, can we enable who I consider kind of to be my clients sometimes, our salespeople, to really fully automate the process on their own? And am I being transparent enough with them to ensure that they are empowered to do it?
There are other third-party apps, so if you don't have a big engineering budget, I'm not saying everyone's the size of Microsoft, so there are a lot of third-party workflow providers that can automate a lot of what most people need their DocuSign flow to do. A good example is using SharePoint in cooperation with like a third-party product called Nintex, which is a workflow management tool. They have a great integration with DocuSign. Some of our teams at Microsoft actually use Nintex in SharePoint to kind of automate their process without spending a lot of money on engineering resources to get that done.
I guess you guys can just keep the microphone. Go ahead.
One of the things I enjoyed about Peggy's presentation yesterday was the idea of using
Yeah, I mean, in essence, that's how I would imagine using it for personal use as well. You know, your daughter or son comes home with a permission slip. You just upload it into your DocuSign account, and you know, attach your signature anchors into the document, and then send it for signature.
Yeah, I really like the idea because it'll push adoption. You know, if you get them used to using it in a personal thing, then
Oh, sure.
And to add on to that, actually, I don't know if anyone in this session was in the session yesterday with LinkedIn and Salesforce, but the speaker for Salesforce actually mentioned that, you know, he was having, in the APAC region, it's very difficult to get electronic signatures because they have a very different cultural process when it comes to actually obtaining those, which we have experienced firsthand multiple times, and we get copies of contracts like 4 weeks later after they have signed. But it's hugely helpful for our CEO, who is the only authorized signatory of all client contracts, when we can utilize it for him, especially when he's traveling, because at the very least, we're still able to send it to him on his own, and then the client will at least receive a carbon copy that they can then print out and wet ink according to their own. So we're still able to be in line with our own process and procedure while not inundating sales and even our client to have to print out and scan and do all those additional things. I actually asked that exact same question in a session yesterday to Salesforce and LinkedIn speakers because I wanted to know how to drive adoption. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know how many of you are actually like the contract managers or at your companies or kind of own this process to be able to implement it across your organization. But to the extent that you are, yeah, it's kind of an uphill battle. Lots of hand-holding, really, and I mean, yeah, lots of TLC. From when I started to implement it, you know, I took on a lot of it on my own, and then basically over time was able to build a business case for why we needed to scale this across the organization. There's a lot of kind of data analytics out there that you can utilize to push certain metrics to build graphs and things like that to actually show your boss or your CEO even, hey, this is how much time I am spending on this manual process. If we can get our sales folks to actually implement this and do this on our own, it's gonna save X amount of time within the legal team, the finance team. You really need to build, I think, a business case surrounding why it's so important. And actually, another great tip that I heard yesterday that that LinkedIn is responsible for mentioning was she said she actually went into the DocuSign platform and looked at each salesperson and was able to determine what the percentage of time they were utilizing DocuSign for. So for instance, like 25% versus 90%. And then she actually went out to everybody under 25% and said, hey, why aren't you utilizing DocuSign? This sales executive was able to close 90% of his or her deals, you know, utilizing this platform. And so kind of asking the why then I think sheds light on, oh, I didn't realize it actually helped that much. Because they think that, oh, it's gonna take me 5 minutes to do this. Well, it's gonna take you 5 seconds to send it through DocuSign. So those are kind of like my 2 main points as to how you could probably do that within your organization.
It didn't work so nicely for us. When I first came in and the CSAs recommended this, I recommended this to my leadership. Why don't we create an electronic signing mandate? Coming from the top down to all employees. Well, apparently the culture at Microsoft is one of rebellion because mandates just simply do not work at Microsoft. People like to do their own thing. They like to a lot of alpha personalities in our organization. And what we ended up having to do is strategically looking for opportunities to really build enough critical mass that we could start creating a champion pool, people actually vouching for the service within Microsoft. Eventually, that momentum started reaching the upper echelons of our organization, and DocuSign even became one of the topics of one of their executive retreats last year. Not necessarily a good way. They were looking at ways. They're very busy people, as you can imagine, and they live a lot of their day within their email. They were looking at ways to reduce email traffic, and so they wanted to identify services that were generating a lot of email. And one of the executives raised their hand and said, "DocuSign? Why do I have to get an email to say I have to sign something? Then immediately after signing it, I get another email saying I signed it." I go, "I know I signed it. Why am I getting an email saying I signed it?" They just couldn't grasp that. So we were able to kind of work with their executive CIO team to help build a platform that was pleasant to the executive team. That drove a lot of enthusiasm from that organization, and our chief financial officer is actually in the process of kind of mandating it to her entire financial organization as a result of that one use case. So my recommendation is go within your organization, find that one low-hanging fruit that you can grab. It doesn't have to be a high volume, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but that will get the right visibility and execute it as perfectly as possible so they can actually see what you're doing, and then based on that, kind of keep that momentum going to help drive adoption from the top down.
Anyone else?
So for us, we have an onboarding process. So we have like an online questionnaire. What do they want to use their DocuSign account for? Who's their organization? What's their use case? Size of organization? Et cetera, et cetera. Then my onboarding team or my support team will work with that organization to determine what type of account structure would work best for them. In many cases, if they are a very low volume user, we have a generic individual, what we call an individual account. So we manage that internally because it's not going through any specific business group. So we can actually see the traffic, make sure that they're not using it for nefarious purposes, they're not abusing the service. In other cases, for larger use cases that they want a team account, we actually share responsibility. Especially in HR and legal teams, they don't necessarily want my team to see the information. There's a lot of PII information, there's a lot of other sensitive information they don't want me to see. So in this case, we share responsibility. We have to kind of sign co-SLAs between the two teams. We have an SLA, a support SLA, a technical SLA, and we will support the program that they're subscribing to from a technical perspective, but they are ultimately the ones who will be responsible for the content that gets shipped out. And so you have to designate an admin, someone within that group that is wanting to take on that responsibility, and because you just simply can't look at everything, you know.
Along that same vein, my position at Tune is actually housed under the legal team, so I'm technically a member of the legal team. Proud to say it. But I am the admin for DocuSign, and what we've ended up doing is actually utilizing the permissions very heavily with DocuSign when it comes to actually assigning people certain abilities, right? So from a contractual perspective, I see everything that comes in and out of our organization. So our sales folks are really kind of very streamlined when it comes to, if it's a custom contract, I created it, so I actually know what they can send and what they can't. And they can send it, and that's fine. When it comes to things like NDAs or standard templates of that nature, we actually have our templates created on DocuSign that they have permission to send. They've been pre-approved, might already be signed by our CEO, and then we know that that had come through us. So we actually require that finance and legal are CC'd on all type of client contracts that come through. So if something were to slip through the cracks, like if they were able to upload an NDA or something, we would immediately know that it wasn't our paper, and then we'd kind of have to deal with that after the fact. But a great way to kind of mitigate that is to say, hey, we already have all these templates in DocuSign for your use. Go ahead and just send ours. And most of the time, that's actually what ends up happening as the default. Go ahead. Yeah.
How do you organize such massive accounts? Like we've got about 500 independent salespeople that sell in homes, and we're trying to figure out a way to implement DocuSign and get it adopted by everybody. But I don't want 500 people in there that own templates in there, and I don't want to manage 500 or 1,000 templates for people. How do you organize your accounts to accommodate the number of people that you're doing it?
Sure. We try to group people within a similar use case. So in your scenario, if these 500 people report through the same organization structure, then you might want to think about maybe possibly, you know, but they tackle different verticals in the business. Maybe create subgroups within your account. And actually, I'm working with DocuSign to kind of do augmented permissions for administrator privileges, where actually it would limit one administrator per group within an account, so they can't see other templates and other groups within your one account, right? If you want to keep the one account dynamic. And then within that group, you can assign just one admin whose sole responsibility is to be responsible for the templates, as an example, over that, and control user access to their one group. Or you can kind of decide, as you being the main admin for the account, you just handle user access, but you designate this one admin to manage the templates, because managing the content of a template is a very litigious matter, and you want to make sure that it's signed off by the right people. I personally don't take that responsibility on my shoulders. I do depend on our legal teams in cases of that, like that, to make sure that whatever is being sent out is approved through the right channel. So you might want to kind of share responsibilities within your organization.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. If you have more questions, I'm sure you guys would feel, you guys all had great questions, so thank you. I think it's lunchtime.
Yep.